The Listowel Ballybunion Railway was a unique, in so many ways, a unique railway in that it was a monorail, a single rail, raised up above ground level with the locomotive and rolling stock, as it were, straddling the single rail. And it was built from the little town of Listowel, 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 out to the coast in County Kerry in southwest Ireland, to the little coastal town of Ballybunion. And the idea was it would link the little seaside town with the conventional railway line that ran through Listowel onto Limerick and up from Cork. And it had a little short trip of only 8.9 miles, and as I say, linking those two towns with a couple of intermediate stations, just stopping places, and a passing loop at one of them at Listowel. Most of the way it ran beside the main road that goes between Listowel and Ballybunion, and indeed if you go along that road today you can still more or less trace where the track had been installed, although there's very little in the way of earthworks. And that's because the track is like a sort of a trestle shape standing up from the ground. When it was suggested by this guy Lartigue, Charles Lartigue, and he basically took the idea from seeing camels in Algeria with panniers, and he thought that if you put a single rail raised up, then you could, on A-shaped A-frame trestles, then you could put a boiler either side and a single wheels in the middle. And the idea was it would be a very lightweight railway that could be perhaps even temporary and used just to pull relatively light weights of freight and passengers, mainly in sort of colonial atmosphere of French Algeria, the idea of using it for military traffic and this sort of thing. And even there was a trench version that was used to some extent during the First World War. And indeed you can sometimes see this in some of the old footage where you've got a rail up at the top of the trench, but hanging down into the trench is slung underneath it. Usually it's a stretcher carrying or ammunition carrying line. Anyway, this was tried out. It was built in the late 1880s, and it was opened on the 29th of February 1888, and the public service began just a few days later on the 5th of March, and it cost them about only about £33,000, which is much less than a conventional railway, but there were quite a few operating drawbacks. I mean, first of all, you had to balance the load. The carriages and indeed wagons straddled the rail, so there had to be some balancing, but not quite as severe as some of the anecdotes about the railway would have us believe. There were a number of apocryphal stories about the Lartigue system, and especially the little line from Listowel to Ballybunion. One was that loads had to be evenly balanced. Well, that's not really that accurate, because although there was the main carrying wheel was on the top of the monorail, there were a couple of guide rails much lower down, and these had small wheels which would have allowed the vehicles, the freight vehicles, to tip slightly, and they would bear on these side wheels. So really it's called a monorail, but really it's a tri-rail in that sense. Nevertheless, some of the stories are, well known. For example, if you want to send a cow to market, and this is what Wikipedia says, you'd have to put two calves on the other side of the wagon so that they could come back on opposite sides of the same wagon, so as to balance each other after the cow got out at the other end. And of course there's another sort of jokey story told of a somewhat substantial lady getting in on a carriage on one side, and because the carriage would be unbalanced, they decided they would put a pig in the other, which of course is neither flattering for the lady or the pig, come to that. quite what they did with the pig at the other end, presumably cut it in half and sent the two halves back. So it's really rather nonsensical, those sort of ideas. Although there was always an effort to try and balance the freight and the passengers, because it allowed for slightly smoother running. One of the problems, though, of course, is that because the rail went right through the carriage at basically head level, then you got the sound of all the wheels and the such springing as there was bearing on the rail coming through the wooden carriage wall. And of course you had to sit with your back to the monorail, so you went along sideways, which wasn't the most pleasant of experiences, has to be said. The track's design meant you couldn't build conventional level crossings, so in order to cross over the railway, they installed a double-sided drawbridge, which basically was a ramp at each end and a drawbridge in the middle, which if you wanted to cross the road you had to operate it yourself, and basically you wound the wheels, wound the mechanism down and then wound it back up afterwards. And there was an automatic little red signal that appeared whenever that was down, so presumably the trains were able to stop in time. With a maximum speed of 20 miles an hour, that's really no real problem. Conventional occupation crossings were dealt with by having a rotating section of track, made much like a turntable, and the farmers were meant to return that so that the trains could carry on going by once that was done. And those were locked by a key, which the farmer held, and then once it was they'd passed, they would then swivel it back and lock it back up again. And always road traffic, unusually road traffic, had the priority over the railway. You couldn't pass along a carriage, you couldn't go from one side to the other side of a carriage while the train's running, but some of the carriages, and indeed there was a separate vehicle also like this, had a series of steps so that you could get off the carriage, and then if the train was still waiting at the station, you wanted to get to the other side of it, you went to the end of the carriage and you climbed up the steps and then down the other side. There were no conventional points or turnouts. If you think about it, it would be next to impossible to do. I can't even imagine. It's a bit like it would be a bit like modern maglev, where the whole track has to literally move across. In fact, it's getting back to the old early days, the early 19th century stub rail type points, but in a massive scale. Well, the way it was solved on the Lartigue system was that you had sections of curved track at a very specific curve, degrees of curve, and you could rotate these, and depending on how you rotated them, it would give you either straight ahead or off to one side. And there were quite a number of variations of these available, and Lartigue built a number of ones, not necessarily for the Listowel system, but in order to demonstrate the flexibility of the system. And but they worked reasonably well. They weren't turntables. You didn't run the train onto them and then turn them round. What you did is rotated them until they showed the correct junction direction, and then the train was able to proceed. The trains, well, there were 3 trains, literally 030s, very unusually, built by Hunslets. They had 2 boilers and 2 fireboxes, which balanced. And the fireman had to stoke one of the fireboxes and the driver had to stoke the other, because you got that great big rail in between the two of them. You couldn't pass from one side of the cab to the other. They also had powered tenders, that is driven from the steam engine itself, and these would assist with pulling the trains up the hills. The trains weren't that particularly heavy, but the amount of adhesion, you've only got a single rail, was quite limited. And each of the Loco 3 locomotives had chimneys, and what else do they have? Well, they had a smaller engine which was called the coffee pot, which was used to build the railway, and then it was used on various demonstration lines, particularly in London. But essentially the system worked fairly well. It was a very remote part of Ireland. There was very little road traffic in the way of competition, very little farm traffic crossing the line, and it was there to demonstrate the system as much as anything. And so opening in 1888, it ran until the Civil War in Ireland after partition, at the time of partition, 1922-23, when it was damaged, but it was included. It was one of those ones that was badly affected by the Civil War, by the fighting, especially at County Kerry. When the Free State was established, it was not gathered into the state-owned Great Southern Railways, which meant it had no money. It had gone bust basically, and it had no choice but to close. And the last train ran on the 14th of October 1924. Everything was scrapped apart from a sort of a little section of track, just to demonstrate what the system was. Now, it did actually occasionally run double-headed trains if race days, when every item of rolling stock was pressed into use, including 2 locomotives. And just to mention that in 2003, a voluntary organisation was established at Listowel, and they opened a kilometre section of Lartigue monorail on the track bed, and it's worked by a replica locomotive, which is actually diesel powered, built by Alan Keefe, and well worth a visit. Definitely go and see it if you're ever down that way. Definitely don't miss out on visiting the restored Listowel and Ballybunion Railway. So here we are in trains, and I've just opened a blank route because I'm now going to show you the models which made, indeed some of them are so old that I made them with Ricky Sykes, about 2007, but they're still working fine, and I want to show you them now. So this will replace an earlier YouTube video I did about the Listowel and Ballybunion, and you'll see here under track over on the right that I've done the spline for the track. So let's put some of that in, and it looks pretty weird. It looks like a fence, which is effectively how it worked for farmers as well, but there it is. And that's an A-frame track, very straightforward. So there's the main carrying rail, and you've got a couple of side rails here which actually acted as guides, steadying the balance, not really as load bearing. This is the load bearing rail, but it meant that if you had only, say, one person or a load on one side of the track, it could only bear down on this side a little bit. And let's put a locomotive in. Here we are, is number, oh, that's the tender, LMBR1, there we are. Let's have a look at that. There it is. So there's the locomotive itself, and then we want a tender. So let's put the tender in. There it is. That's the 2 parts of the locomotive, and you can see it's got a boiler either side. It's got this massive lamp on the front here, and you've got the driver and the fireman. They each had a firebox to stoke to keep going, and actually should be coal in there, but maybe not. There's a coal. If we can put a bit of coal in. Tender 1. Number. Oh no, that's it. No. Oh well, it must have to fill up at a coaling station. I forget now how I did that, but you'll soon be able to sort that out. And if we put in some of the rolling stock, you'll see here there's quite a lot of rolling stock here. It's all available on my website. So there's an open wagon, and that would carry sand. There we are. There's a whole load of loads there, but it's set also to, it's either that type of load, commodity load, or cattle. Oh goodness. And there's hogs, but also we've got, where are we? I thought I did a, oh, it's a sand wagon I'm thinking of. Let's put some cattle in. Where are we? Put a couple of cattle in, see if that works. I haven't done this for years, but Oops, they disappeared for some reason. How very odd. Oh, I know why. So, maximum load. I didn't click on the... I clicked on 2 and then I clicked on the X. Very silly of me. There we are, there's a couple of cattle there. It was about the most that you could carry in those. And then we had... what else have we got? We've got Parcels Van. And this was one of its main sources of freight, sand, and that was carried up from, so we've got a maximum load of 5080, so let's put that in. That was carried up from the seashore at Ballybunion. Oh, I've done the same thing again, how silly of me. Tick, tick. There we are. And that was carried up from the seashore at Ballybunion, and it was used mainly, not so much for the building trade as agricultural purposes. Here's one of those, here's the steps wagon, so it was just literally a wagon, and you can see the buffers there, raised up quite high, look. And that was just for getting over the rails. What else have we got here? We've got, that looks like a Linton and Barnstaple Railway, so that can't be right. Brake third, and BER. I thought I had all the, maybe it's under, oh here we are. So let's have a look here. It's a first third, because they had different, a first third with a brake section, and they had these rather odd roofs as well, and you can see there, looking down through there, you can see the wheels running on the rail, and then underneath here, I don't know if we'll see them, or even if I modelled them. No, I don't think I did. I think I just gave that up. Oh yes, I did. There we are. Look, there's the horizontal wheels. There, you can just about make it out. Horizontal wheel. I just did that basic there, and of course that'd be the same on the locomotive as well. You've got those there. They are. Look, there's the horizontal wheels that ran on these rails. So they're guide rails. So they're to stop it tipping to one side or the other. So all this talk about having, you know, a cow on one side and 2 calves on the other is a bit of nonsense, really. We've even got a first class carriage there. There's quite a number of carriages, and I remember I modelled all of them. So there we are. Now what are the do's and don'ts about this system? Well, let's add a bit more track over there, and then let's put a bit over here. Now what you don't do with the spline is just make an ordinary junction like that. It will do it because, you know, it's a track as far as trains is concerned. Trains just operates on a single centre line, no matter what the mesh shows. And you know, it looks all right, but of course no train is ever going to be able to negotiate that. And Lartigue was no fool, and he understood the sort of problems that would be involved in that. So he came up with a system, and they're underneath. They're in the scenery items here. So here is the junction. Here is a junction of the Listowel and Ballybunion Railway, and it's a junction for a train to go either to the right or to the left. Now let's just rotate that 90 degrees or thereabouts. 270, 270. There we are. And let's add a bit of track. So back over here and bring in some track, and people get working. Okay, and then a bit of track off there, and you just connect it up like you would a turntable. But it's not a turntable, it's a junction. I'm not sure if I have to do it in this or in, I can just do it in driver. To rotate it. That's just in driver. I can never remember these things. So let's put another one in. 3 points, 3 exits, you'll notice. And there are others with 4, 5 and 6 exits, so you can have really complicated junctions. As if the Listowel wasn't complicated enough already. And so let's put some more track in. Let's connect this up. There we go. And take this one and connect it up over here. And this sort of elegant curve was very much a feature. This curve here was very much a feature of the Listowel and Ballybunion. Let's take a bit of track out there and then take it round. Just give it a bit of a curve there, take it back. There we are. And so what I'm going to do is, what shall I do? Let's have a look. We'll demonstrate this. Let's connect this right the way up. Where are we? So just going to make a loop. So it's going to be like a play on the carpet train set. If I can find where the other one is. Oh, there it is. So let's go back a bit. There we are. So it gives us a complete loop, complete looper. And we just make that. And there should be somewhere. I think I've got a. Let me just see if I've got LMB. No, I can't see it there. There should be a buffer stop. So all I'll do is I'll just stick in an invisible buffers there. And stick it in down here. In fact, it's so invisible I can't see it. How frustrating. Let's go back. Let's not do that. Let's stick in a plateway buffer. There we are, because I can see that. That's just plateway track. Something else I've made. Let's make some plateway procedural at some stage. Okay, so there we are. And so now I'm going to demonstrate how this junction here works. And to do that, I'm going to go into driver, and I'm going to save this, and we'll just call it Listowel demo. And we just go into, here we are, just leaving it on just the ordinary, and so let's get it underway. Actually start like this, otherwise then cattle will be on their knees. So I wasn't worried about the order that we're doing, because naturally you would have a break road line. So let's go to 3 lanes. When the train comes, it's going to run off the end. That's no good. So let's just bring it forward. Let's just let the train come forward. I mean, really, was a bonkers system. But who could resist it? It'd be lovely to have a branch running from a little station. So there we are. Let's make sure that's stopped there. I'm just stopping it because I want to demonstrate the junction, which hopefully is going to work. There it goes. So what this junction is not going to do is, I hope, is stop there. No, it's going to go straight on, because that would have meant, I was pointing with my finger, that would have meant that it was just run off into the ground there, and it's not going to stop here either, because again it wouldn't go across. What it's going to do now, swing right round, and it should hopefully it should stop here. There we go, bingo. Now our train can go forward. Of course you can put in signals. Signals were pretty rudimentary. Remember the maximum speed is 20 miles an hour. We're only doing 4. That would be pretty standard. 4 or 5 miles an hour would be pretty standard for running over a junction like this. You'll see why as soon as it goes over the junction. It's a half wiggle. Seeing that the rail doesn't look very tightly positioned there. There we go. Bringing along like a snake. Oh goodness. Okay, so you can see how that then works. That's how the junctions work, and always you need to if we just bring that on again. You'll see now it would, if we were to reverse the locomotive, in fact let's do that. Let's just take it down a bit. Let's stop it. Where are we? We're just waiting for this to finish. And this is at walking pace, because that's how these junctions would change. You literally drive in file and got out and pushed it, or if there was station staff around. Okay, right. And now let's go into reverse. And of course, because it's acting like a turntable, though it's not a turntable, you don't turn items on it. Give it a little belly there. A bit more, open up the regulator. It's a more accurate way of describing it. A bit fast. And there we are. That is prototypical. All of these junctions were taken from the scale plans, which I remember using at the time. So the angles are correct. Yeah, it has. And here we have another junction, a turnout that's set correctly. If you stop that, you'll see that. Let's try and get over it. There we are. And now it's got to rotate almost, certainly more than 180 degrees. I've got to try and remember. What's that? It's about 210 degrees. I remember having loads of fun trying to get the degrees right. And sometimes also I found that the stub connections, where this end here connected up to the track, if you zoom right in you can see there's a slight mismatch, but I tried everything to clear that. I couldn't, because you've got to be able to get it to rotate and agree with all the angles. So fair play to Mr. Larty to actually managing to solve that. Yeah, well, that's not too bad. I think it's over there, that far end. Yeah, there's a bit of a, you can see there. Bear with, that's close as I'm going to get it. Okay, so let's go back to, I won't bother saving, let's go back to Surveyor. And so those are those junctions, and now let's have a look at the other junctions that are available. So that's a 3-exit junction, and we've got a 4-exit, a 5-exit, and a 6-exit, and that covers virtually everything that you'll need. What I've also got here is, where are we? Should be somewhere here. Station offices. Can't see the turntable. Settling, crossing, Drawbridge. Oh, there we are. Loco Turntable, of course. Okay. So there's the conventional turntable. That's a straightforward 180 degree turntable. No complications there. There's the loco shed, and if we just rotate that round, come on, go around that way. You see it's set up with a track inside, so you can take a run from. You can move that in front of there, which was the normal place for it, and then just connect it up with some spline track, and that will give you. That's the loco shed. The drawbridge, I should really show you this. This is quite something. Let's try and put it here. This drawbridge is normally, let's rotate it a bit. So this is what they use to cross public roads. Let me just bring this bit of track up to here, and I'll lay another bit just to there. And if I put the coffee pot, let's put the coffee pot on there. I'll show you the coffee pot. And I thought that was then going to function. It was actually going to open. Well, I'll go into driver and have a look at that. But there's the coffee pot. That's the little constructional locomotive. You can see where it got its name from. Just one guy sat there. It was very conventional sort of constructional style locomotive. And what else shall I do? Well, what I'll do is I'll delete that track there, and I'll put the ordinary crossing in, and you can see that that's animated because it's just animated itself. So if I turn that around 90 degrees about. So, no, track needs to click to it, doesn't it? Oh, how annoying. There we are. And I think that'll work. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, we'll give it another go in Driver. And here we are. We're actually, and it's raised up there. So if we reverse, I'm not sure if it'll run away or not. Keep that with absolutely brilliant. Junction. Send it free running. So let that chunter away. Way to go, yeah. Fastest of the vehicle. But you can see here that the drawbridge has been raised. And there's the red warning sign, and those are the little wheels. And what you had to do is basically pull on the chain to lower it, and then after you've gone over, you're meant to pull on the chain to open the train again. And if we just pull on here, you can see, there we are, that's just opened itself for the crossing. Okay, let's have a go. And then, there we are. Now that should mean that the crossing has, there we are, it's just come down. Trust me, it has. So it's close to the train, it's got the red up, and it's close to the train there, but that's an occupation crossing. And you can see it's a very sort of Brunel-like, actually, signal bar there to show that you mustn't cross the crossing. So there we are, that is the Listowel Ballybunion monorail system, and it's all still working fine. It originally made about 10-12 years ago now, and still working fine in trains, a new era. So I would, you know, if you fancy something a bit weird to add to your layout as a, as I say, as a branch or as a little feeder item, it won't connect up with anything else, of course. Well, it will, because trains will connect anything to anything, but please don't, it looks daft. And I mean, that's daft there, that should be just I think I just use an invisible buffer at the end of the tracks, because that's just about what happened on the original. So if we change this back, let's see if I can give you a view. Move. Oh, there we go. And you'll see there, once it rotates all the way around so that the coffee pot could come back down this track, it triggers the crossing. So let's just have a quick look. Still got a way to go, still rotating there, and coming round. There it goes, there's the animation. And if we sent the coffee pot coming forward, then eventually here it comes, going like a crazy thing. Eventually this, as it approaches this crossing, in the way of a normal level crossing, it would it'll turn that as well. That will function as well. But that will stay up now until the locomotive is passed. There it goes, there's the crossing. There we are. So you have all the bits and pieces you need really to construct a monorail in trains, and it's a genuine monorail. It ran for, what was that, about 40, 50 years almost. 30, 40 years. And so it functioned perfectly okay. You have a variety of rolling stock. I've also put in a station building and a loco shed, so altogether you can really have a wonderful little monorail system running on your train's layout. So hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope it's explained how to do it. And if you've enjoyed it, please leave me a thumbs up on YouTube, leave a comment, and please subscribe to my channel, ING4Trains.